Hello again, and a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Nigel Worth of Hope Church Thetford, and during this time of lockdown I decided to produce a series of 8 videos that we've entitled So, You're a Bit Curious About God? They're designed to give us all an opportunity to consider the big question in life. Is there really a God? And can I connect with him for my good? So, this is video number 3. Put up a chair, pour yourself a coffee, and let's get going. Now, to be a Christian is to put your faith and trust in Jesus. It's to become a follower of Jesus. Now, that's a pretty big call, as I'm sure you'll agree. And so, rather than it being just a blind step of faith, in this video I want to give us all an introduction to Jesus. Who is he? Who is he really? Well, the first thing we want to just establish before we do anything else is that Jesus was a real historical man. No one who looks at this question seriously would doubt that Jesus was a real historical character. So the 4 Gospels are historical documents that were written by eyewitnesses at the time. And they record the life and events that happened in Jesus' life. But there are others who were not Christians, who were not his followers, who also documented the life of Jesus at this time. Now, one of them was a man called Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, not a Christian historian, and he was born 37 years after Jesus was born. And this is what he said. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He was Christ, and when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again on the 3rd day. The tribe of Christians, so named after him, are not extinct at this day. No, they are not extinct at this day either. So roughly 1/3 of the Earth's population at this time would claim to be Christians. So Jesus was a real man, and in the Gospels we see the sorts of things that you would expect of a real human being. He had a human body that could become tired and hungry. He had human emotions. He loved. He could be overcome with joy, but he could be very sad. He could also be very angry. On one famous occasion, he overturned the tables in the temple in Jerusalem because the money changers there were ripping off the ordinary people. And that made Jesus so angry. He just stormed in and just turned over all the tables. He had human experiences as well. He grew up in a real family. He grew up with parents, with brothers and sisters, and he worked in the family carpentry business. He ate, he drank, and he slept. And he had friends, and he had enemies. And he was also subject to the same kind of temptations that we are. But was that all? Who was Jesus? Who is Jesus? Now, an outstanding Christian rock singer and songwriter in my younger days was the late Larry Norman, and he wrote a song called The Outlaw when he explored who Jesus was. Now, I know you want me to sing it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm awfully sorry. No, I'm not going to sing it, but I am going to read out some of the lyrics from this song. Some say he was an outlaw, that he roamed across the land, with a band of unschooled ruffians and a few old fishermen. No one knew just where he came from, or exactly what he'd done, but they said it must be something bad that kept him on the run. Some say he was a poet, that he'd stand upon the hill, that his voice could calm an angry crowd and make the waves stand still, that he spoke in many parables that few could understand, but the people sat for hours just to listen to this man. Some say he was a sorcerer, a man of mystery. He could walk upon the water, he could make a blind man see, that he conjured wine at weddings and did tricks with fish and bread, that he talked of being born again and raised people from the dead. Some say a politician who spoke of being free. He was followed by the masses on the shores of Galilee. He spoke out against corruption, and he bowed to no decree. And they feared his strength and power, so they nailed him to a tree. Now, that was Larry Norman. But is Jesus even more than these things? Well, to find that out, we'll need to take a closer look at the things that Jesus said and the things that he did. So let's look first of all at what Jesus said. Now, bits of the teaching of Jesus, I'm sure you're going to be familiar with already. So certain phrases like, love your neighbour as yourself, turn the other cheek, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, are phrases that we use in everyday life. But they're the words of Jesus that we are speaking. And some of his parables are well known as well. So just think of the Good Samaritan, who helped out someone from a different and a despised ethnic race to his own. Or think of the prodigal son, who messed up in life, but eventually returned home to his father to receive an open-armed welcome and forgiveness that he really did not deserve. But the main themes in his teaching were far more radical. So for starters, a lot of his teaching was centred upon himself. Now, if I tried to do that, if I set aside a whole video just to talk about me, I don't think you'd be very impressed. But that's exactly what Jesus did. Some of his key teaching was centred around himself. So he said he was the light of the world. He said that he was the resurrection and the life. We heard how last time he said that he was the way and the truth and the life. He said, come to me if you are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. He said that if you've seen me, then you've seen God himself. So much centering around himself, and nobody laughed. There's a story about a little boy in school, and he set out to draw God. But no one knows what God looks like, scolded his teacher. They will do when I've finished, the boy replied. But Jesus said, you want to know what God looks like? Then just look at me. Now, the next thing about Jesus' teaching that was radical is that he claimed to forgive sins. Now, we're used to forgiving other people, aren't we? So if you were to hurt me and I forgave you, then that would just be the decent thing to do. But if it was God you offended and you've broken his laws and I forgave you on God's behalf, then that would be something else completely, wouldn't it? I mean, who do you think you are, claiming to take God's place and to pronounce forgiveness on his behalf? But Jesus did, and this so offended the religious leaders of his day that they plotted to have him executed for blasphemy. In their eyes, Jesus had done something that only God could do, which was to forgive the sins of human beings against God. And so this leads us on to the third radical aspect of Jesus' teaching, and it's this: he claimed to be God. At his trial, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," Jesus replied. The high priest then pronounced that blasphemy against God had been committed, and the death sentence followed. Jesus was on his way to the cross. Jesus had also said on one occasion, "I and the Father are one." So now, what do we make of all of this? This is what C.S. Lewis, the Christian writer who wrote the Narnia books, had to say about all of this. A man who was merely a man and said the sorts of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on the level of a man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. But let us not come up with any patronising nonsense about his just being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So the teaching of Jesus forces us all to make a decision about who Jesus really was and is. Can I take this man seriously today? Well, let's now have a look at what Jesus did. We could talk about his miracles, supernatural events that defy the law of nature. We've just already heard that Larry Norman sung about them. He walked upon the water. He made the blind man see. We've heard those lyrics already. Amazingly, Jesus said that his followers could expect to do the same kinds of miracles themselves. Signs and wonders, they're called in the Bible. And we've already seen quite a few of them in our church, but we'll come back to them in future videos. But Jesus also did things that reflected his amazing heart for people. The love he showed for people not normally loved. He was called a friend of sinners. He could be found around pubs, he could be found around prostitutes, and ordinary people loved him. Just to pick up one story at random. A woman had been caught in an adulterous relationship with a man, but it was the woman who was dragged before Jesus by the religious leaders, and they wanted the endorsement of Jesus for them to stone her, according to the law of the day. But Jesus then uttered the famous words, "Let one of you who is without sin be the first to cast the first stone." Now, the men had nothing to say at this, and one by one, they shamefacedly just slunk away, just leaving Jesus and a very grateful woman. Jesus was truly a friend of sinners. What Jesus did displayed not only his supernatural power, but also his character. Now let's now hear what one of the former Lord Chancellors of this country, Lord HAILSHAM, had to say about Jesus. He said this: "The first thing we must learn about him is that we would have been absolutely entranced by his company. Jesus was irresistibly attractive as a man. What they crucified was a young man, vital, full of life and the joy of it, the Lord of life itself. We need to recapture the vision of this glorious and happy man whose mere presence filled his companions with delight. He would have the children laughing all around him and squealing with pleasure and joy as he picked them up. This is Jesus. He was someone who showed us unselfishness, but never self-pity, who showed us humility, but never weakness, who showed us joy, but never at someone else's expense, who showed us kindness, but never self-indulgence. This is our Jesus. Well, it's nearly time for me to wind up. We've just given ourselves a maximum time of 20 minutes, top whack, for each of these videos. I think we're nearly getting there. Now then, suppose that you've been listening to this video and you've known little or nothing about Jesus up to now. Or let's just suppose that you've grown up with a very distorted view of who Jesus really is. And maybe you've been challenged by what I've had to say. Maybe your view of Jesus has been changed, or certainly given you something to think about. He was an extraordinary historical figure. The things he said, the things he did, and the way in which everybody loved him. He was truly a hero, a wonderful hero. It was the comedian Billy Connolly who said this: "I can't believe in Christianity, we're not told why, but I think Jesus was a wonderful man." Well, that's lovely, but I need to tell you something now. We haven't yet got to the heart of what Jesus came to do. And we haven't yet seen how it is that Jesus could be the way to God, to help us to make a connection with God for our good. Now, in the next video, and the one after that, we're going to put this right. So stick with us. As always, I'm very happy to receive any questions or comments about anything that we've looked at today. Feel free to post a comment on this platform here, or else in just a moment I'll put my contact details up on the screen on a slide, and feel free to contact me in that way. So stay safe, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you very much for listening.